Between 2012 and 2016, the United Kingdom executed a comprehensive redesign of its welfare administration. The stated objectives presented to Parliament were simplification and fiscal efficiency. Over that same period, measurable indicators of severe administrative harm, including youth mental health distress and acute deprivation, rose sharply. This creates a paradox. A legally functioning, rule-bound administrative system is systematically producing life-threatening outcomes for the people it exists to support. This is a predictable consequence of modern administrative engineering. When major public sector reorganizations fragment statutory duties, they do not eliminate risk. They transfer that risk into hidden architectural voids where accountability vanishes. We can observe this engineering flaw in practice through the Belfast case study. This is an administrative near-miss of starvation caused entirely by a processing blockage. Inside the Universal Credit Journal, the claimant issued an explicit warning. My question remains, is this an attempt to break me through hunger, deprivation, and denial of basic human rights? The physical reality of the crisis was visible. The claimant was physically present at a local job center, accompanied by the British Red Cross. Yet the system remained paralyzed. The claimant's legal entitlement to these funds existed the entire time. The delay was caused by the administration's own internal structure. When a centralized system receives direct notice of a citizen's imminent physical collapse and still refuses to act, it is operating within a liability loop. The primary driver of this near-miss is a mechanism called administrative distance. The modern welfare system separates its powers. Local job centers handle the human interaction, while distant centralized hubs make the actual financial decisions. The claimant's distress signal reaches the supportive local job center, but it hits an impenetrable block at the centralized processing node. Frontline staff witness the human cost of destitution, suffering moral injury because they lack power to override the blockage. The structure ensures no single actor owns the final outcome. Whole pathway responsibility has been severed. Liability loops legally protect the administrative system from blame, while offloading the lethal physical risk entirely onto the citizen. This failure model scales. The 2016 welfare redesign applied these mechanics across the national demographic. The 2016 reforms reduced parliamentary visibility of early child vulnerability. The state replaced income-based poverty targets with a life chances framework, obscuring the immediate material realities of low-income families. By April 2025, the two-child limit policy restricted support for 469,780 households. Expanding this to individual dependents reveals 1,665,540 children live within this restricted architecture. This vulnerability compounding, as 40% of these households also receive health or disability support. The state has engineered mass-scale demographic exposure. Over 1 million children are subjected to administrative instability and poverty during their most formative developmental years. Prolonged childhood instability produces a delayed longitudinal effect known as cohort damage. We can track the cohort of children exposed to the 2012 and 2016 welfare redesigns as they aged into late adolescence by 2023. This chart tracks the timeline. As welfare restrictions are implemented, youth distress rises, with probable mental disorders among 17 to 19-year-olds climbing from 10 to 23.3%. Simultaneously, hospital admissions for youth self-harm increased by 37% over the same period. While a single causal chain cannot be isolated in complex demographic data, the severe temporal correlation between systemic childhood deprivation and subsequent youth distress demands parliamentary scrutiny. Short-term fiscal savings achieved through welfare restructuring are visibly generating measurable long-term developmental damage to the country's future human capital. Fragmented accountability is not isolated to the Department for Work and Pensions. It infects other safety-critical public services. The Health and Care Act 2022 and the 2023 NHS consolidations merged statutory functions, centralizing data and education bodies within the health service. Following these changes, Parliament's expert panel found the government's progress on implementing patient safety recommendations requires improvement. They noted there is no formal mechanism in place to systematically track them. Despite unresolved safety gaps, the Secretary of State's 2026 announcement pushes for further massive restructuring, including abolishing NHS England and implementing whole population budgets. Across both welfare and healthcare, the state routinely advances to the next layer of structural reorganization before proving that the previous redesign delivered its promised benefits or protected citizens. This raises a critical engineering question. Why do these systemic harms continuously bypass standard government project delivery and assurance frameworks? The Treasury Green Book and existing functional standards dictate how major public programs are appraised and evaluated. These controls rigidly test for financial viability, deliverability, and basic project assurance. They do not test for constitutional safety. A massive state reorganization can satisfy a business case and remain under budget, while simultaneously destroying the public's ability to identify who holds the legal duty for their survival. Applying financial assurance tools to constitutional reorganizations creates an illusion of control over unsafe systems. The required systemic fix is a constitutional impact assessment. This assessment must be legally triggered before any major transfer of statutory functions, creation of arm's-length bodies, or centralization of safety-critical systems. The absolute minimum outputs required are a named statutory duty holder map, a risk aggregation route, and a remedy map. In practice, the remedy map forces the state to prove exactly how a citizen can challenge a systemic blockage before the new system is ever built. Parliament must halt further planned reorganizations, including the 2026 NHS reforms and future welfare digitizations, until this control layer is applied and prior benefits are evidenced. Public administration is not validated by the volume of its digital processing or fiscal efficiency. It is validated by its capacity to preserve democratic accountability, trace legal responsibility, and protect the human capital of the nation.